parenting can really test your patience, right?
Oh, yeah.
Like sometimes it feels like a constant struggle. And,
Yeah.
we actually got a really interesting video sent in by one of our listeners on mindful discipline. So I figured, why not do a deep dive into it
Yeah, that's a good idea.
and see what we can learn from it?
Yeah, it's interesting because the video frames mindful discipline as like mindful parenting, which is kind of like a shift in your whole mindset about how you approach
Great.
parenting.
It's not just about getting kids to behave. It's about
Yeah.
changing how we react as parents.
Exactly. And I think one of the most impactful things the video emphasizes is like the power of presence.
Mm.
Like how often are we really giving our kids
Yeah.
full, undivided attention?
Well, I know I'm certainly guilty of trying to multitask while my kids are telling me something,
Yeah.
trying to get dinner ready or fold laundry or whatever. But
Right.
there was this one point that they made in the video that really stuck with me.
Mm-hmm.
And it was that feeling truly heard is like a gift that you can give your children.
That's good.
And I thought that was really powerful.
Yeah. And so the video highlights how important just like putting down your phone is. Which sounds so basic and obvious, but can be so hard to do.
It's funny. They actually had like a visual in the video of a parent like putting down their phone to listen to their kid who's telling them a story. And I was like, oh, how many times do we miss those little moments because we're distracted?
Right, because we're just so used to constantly being on our devices.
Right.
It's such a good reminder. Presence isn't about being perfect.
Right.
It's about those small,
Yeah.
little intentional choices to connect.
Like what kind of things?
Well, they suggest things like actively listening, and repeating back what your kid is saying to show that you understand.
Oh, yeah. I've started doing that. And it's amazing how much calmer things get when my kids feel like I'm really listening.
Yeah, it's a total game changer, right?
Yeah.
And it forces us to slow down.
Yeah.
Like really hear what they're saying.
Okay. But what about discipline?
Oh, yeah.
Because that's where I struggle. Like, how does all this mindful parenting stuff work when your kid is like having a meltdown in the middle of the grocery store?
Yeah, well, the video's approach to discipline is really fascinating. It says discipline shouldn't be about punishment, but more about teaching and guiding and nurturing.
Okay. Okay, but how do you teach a toddler who's like screaming for candy at the checkout?
It's tough.
Yeah.
But the video says the key is compassion. It's about trying to see the world from your child's perspective and respond with empathy, which I know can be really hard in those moments.
Yeah.
But I think of this great example, like a kid spills their juice. And instead of the parent freaking out, they just calmly say, accidents happen, let's clean it up together.
That's so much easier said than done. But
it is, yeah. But I see how it would teach a kid that mistakes aren't the end of the world.
Right.
And the video even breaks down compassionate discipline into 3 actionable tips.
Okay, I like that.
So the first is name the child's emotion. So like you might say, I see you're feeling frustrated.
Okay, so instead of shutting down the emotion, you're acknowledging it.
Exactly.
Okay.
What's next?
The second tip is stay calm yourself.
Okay.
Which, again, can be easier said than done.
Yeah.
But remember, kids are like little emotional sponges. They totally pick up on our vibes.
So I guess screaming, stop screaming isn't really the best approach.
Yeah. Yeah. And the third tip is to offer solutions.
Okay. So instead of just saying, don't do that.
Yeah.
You might say, next time, let's put the juice on the table so it doesn't spill.
So it's about guiding them toward making a different choice.
Exactly.
Okay.
And this whole idea of guidance really connects to their next point, which is the importance of consistency with flexibility.
Ooh, that sounds tricky.
It can be.
Yeah.
It's about finding that balance between like setting those clear boundaries and then being able to adapt to life's little curveballs.
Oh, yeah. Like in the video, they had this example about screen time. The rule is no screens before bed, but for family movie night, they make an exception.
Exactly. And it shows that the rules aren't meant to be like rigid and controlling, but more like guidelines that could be adjusted.
So it teaches kids that life isn't always black and white.
Right.
Okay, I see what you mean.
Yeah, and it helps build trust because they know you're not just like arbitrarily enforcing these rules.
Okay, so we've got presence, we've got compassionate discipline. What else does this video get into?
Well, this is where things get really interesting. Video spends a lot of time talking about self-regulation.
Makes sense. I mean, how can we expect our kids to like manage their emotions if
Oh,
we're the ones losing it all the time?
exactly. And the video even goes into how children are wired to mirror our emotional states.
Oh, I've heard of that, like emotional contagion or something.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So when we as parents get anxious or stressed,
Right.
our kids pick up on it. Like their little nervous systems go haywire.
It's almost like they know when we're at our breaking point and then they have a meltdown.
It's like they can sense it, yeah.
Yeah. So if we know that now, how do we actually change that?
Well, it's a skill, right?
Mm.
Self-regulation is a skill, and it
Right.
takes practice.
Mm.
And I think it starts with being aware of our own triggers.
Okay.
Like what sets us off as parents.
For me, it's definitely when I feel rushed or overwhelmed. Like when we're late for school and everybody's losing shoes,
Yeah.
I can feel my anxiety like skyrocketing.
Yeah, that's so relatable. So once you can identify those triggers,
Mm.
then you can start to develop those coping mechanisms. Remember those techniques they talked about in the video?
Oh, yeah, the pausing and breathing and
Yeah, the counting to 10.
yeah.
Those are all just to
Hmm.
interrupt that automatic stress response.
And I've actually been trying to just be more mindful of my breathing throughout the day.
Yeah.
And it actually helps. Even just taking a few deep breaths before I react to a situation
Yeah.
can make a big difference.
It really can. It's amazing how powerful that is. And they also talk about affirmations.
Oh, yeah, like repeating phrases to yourself like,
Mm.
I am calm, I can handle this.
Yeah, like sometimes you just got to talk yourself off the ledge.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But, what really resonated with me from the video is that idea that
Yeah.
our ability to stay calm as parents can really impact the whole household.
Absolutely. I think they said something like a calm parent creates a calm child.
Right. Or at least a calmer environment, which
Yeah.
leads to less stress all around.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got presence, we've got compassionate discipline,
Yes.
we've got self-regulation. Where do we go from here?
Well, the video then moves into this other important aspect, which is positive reinforcement.
Mm.
It's easy to get so caught up in correcting bad behavior
Mm.
that we forget to acknowledge the good.
Oh, I'm so guilty of that. I'm way quicker to point out what my kids are doing wrong
Yeah.
than to praise them for what they're doing right.
And the video talks about how impactful that can be on a child's behavior and self-esteem.
Okay, so like what kinds of things are we talking about here?
Oh, they gave some simple examples like, thank you for sharing with your brother, or I'm proud of how you handled your frustration.
See, that's where I struggle because it feels so cheesy to say those things.
It does.
But I guess it makes a difference for kids to hear it.
I think so.
Yeah.
And they talked about being specific in your praise.
Okay.
So instead of good job,
Hmm.
you might tell them exactly what they did well.
So instead of good job cleaning your room, you might say,
Yeah.
I love how you organize all the books on your bookshelf. It makes your whole room look so tidy.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
That way they understand exactly
Yeah.
what behavior you're appreciating.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
What else stood out to you from the video?
Well, the last big concept they talked about was collaborative problem solving.
Hmm.
And that's this idea of involving your kids in finding solutions rather than just telling them what to do.
Oh, I like that. That gives them a sense of ownership.
Exactly. And it teaches them problem-solving skills, too.
Right, yeah.
Like one of the examples they gave was a parent asking their kid, what do you think we can do to make mornings smoother? And the kid came up with the idea of picking out their clothes the night before.
It's brilliant because it takes the pressure off the parent to come up with all the solutions.
Right.
And it makes the kid feel like
Yeah.
their opinion matters.
Yeah. And the video pointed out that when kids are part creating solutions, they're much more likely to follow through.
This is making me realize that mindful discipline is about so much more
Right.
than just getting kids to behave.
Yeah.
It's about creating a deeper connection with them
Yes.
and helping them to actually develop like important life skills.
It really is a whole new way of looking at it.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground already, but there's still so much more to this mindful discipline thing. Be sure to come back for the next part of our show where we continue this deep dive.
Mm.
This mindful discipline video is really making me think about how I react to things as a parent.
Yeah, it really does make you examine your own behavior, doesn't it?
It does. It's not always easy, but I'm curious about this thing they talk about in the video about consistency with flexibility.
Right.
How do you find that balance?
Yeah, it's tough. It's about setting those expectations and boundaries for your kids, but recognizing that sometimes you need to be flexible.
Right, like with their screen time example, no screens before bed, but an exception for family movie night.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
And the video even suggests involving your kids in the decision-making when possible. Like you could say, hey, we usually don't do screens before bed, but tonight's movie night. What do you guys think? Should we make an exception?
I love that because it's like you're honoring the rule, but
Yeah.
also acknowledging that sometimes it's okay to
Yes,
bend it a little.
yeah, and that rules aren't about being controlling, but more about
Right.
creating a structure that works for everyone.
It teaches kids that life isn't black and white.
Exactly.
Okay, so consistency with flexibility, check.
Yeah.
But let's go back to the self-regulation thing, because I think that's where I struggle the most.
Yeah.
I mean, how do you stay calm when your toddler is having a meltdown in the middle of Target?
That is the question, isn't it? But the video actually goes into, like, the science a little bit. Like, kids are actually wired to mirror our emotional states.
Oh, like that emotional contagion thing?
Exactly, yeah. So when we as parents get anxious,
Right.
our kids pick up on that and their nervous systems go into overdrive.
Which is why they always seem to have meltdowns at the worst possible time. It's like
Okay.
they can sense it when we're already at our breaking point.
Exactly, they can sense it. So how do we actually change that?
Yeah, that's what I want to know.
Well, self-regulation is a skill,
Okay.
and it takes practice.
Okay.
And I think the first step is awareness.
Okay.
Like, what are your triggers? What sets you off as a parent?
Well, for me, it's when I feel rushed.
Hmm.
Like, if we're late for school and everybody's running around like crazy trying to find their shoes, I can feel my anxiety just, like, shoot through the roof.
That's so relatable.
Mm.
So once you know what your triggers are, then you can start to develop those coping strategies. Right. Remember all those little techniques they talked about in the video, the pausing, the breathing deeply, counting to 10, all that.
Right.
Those are all just to help you interrupt that, like, automatic stress response.
You know, I've actually been trying to be more mindful of my breathing throughout the day, and it really does seem to help. Even just taking a few deep breaths before I react to a situation can make a big difference.
Oh, it's huge, yeah. It's amazing how much that can actually impact things.
Yeah, it is.
And then there's affirmations, too.
Oh, yeah, like telling yourself, I am calm, I can handle this.
Exactly,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah,
Sometimes you just have to talk yourself off the ledge, right?
exactly. But what really resonated with me was that idea that our ability to stay calm as parents
Right.
really affects the whole house.
Absolutely, yeah. A calm parent, a calm child, or at least a calmer environment.
Right, less stress for everybody.
Yeah.
Okay, so we talked about presence, we've got compassion, discipline, self-regulation.
Right.
Anything else in this video that really stuck with you?
Well, the last thing they talked about was positive reinforcement.
Right.
And I think it's so important because it's easy to get so caught up in correcting the bad behavior that we forget to acknowledge the good stuff.
I am so guilty of that. Like, I am way quicker to point out what my kids are doing wrong than to praise them for what they're doing right.
And the video emphasizes how important that positive reinforcement is for a kid's behavior and their self-esteem.
So, like, what kind of things are we talking about specifically?
Well, they gave a lot of simple examples, like just saying, thank you for sharing with your brother, or I'm so proud of you for how you handled your frustration.
See, that's where I get tripped up because it feels so cheesy to say stuff like that.
It does.
But I guess it really makes a difference for kids.
It does, yeah. And they talk about being really specific in your praise, too.
Yeah.
So, like, instead of just good job, actually telling them what they did well.
So, like, instead of just saying, you were so good at the store today, I might say, wow, you were so patient while we were waiting in that long line.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
It helps them connect those dots.
Makes them feel seen and understood.
Exactly. And it can even help build their intrinsic motivation, too. When they know that their efforts are being acknowledged and appreciated, they're more likely to want to keep doing it.
Yeah, because even as adults, we love positive feedback.
We do. It makes us feel good and want to keep trying. So it's the same for kids, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So specific praise check, but what about those times when your kid is just like really struggling with a particular behavior, like let's say they're always fighting with their sibling? How do you use positive reinforcement in a situation like that?
That is a great question. And one thing the video suggests is, like, focusing on the behavior that is incompatible with the negative behavior.
Okay, so instead of saying stop fighting all the time, you try to catch them when they are being kind to each other.
Yes.
And then really make a big deal out of it.
Exactly. So, like, wow, you guys are playing so well together. I love how you're sharing those toys.
And the idea is, by focusing on the positive, you're kind of encouraging more of that.
Yes.
Which then leaves less room for the negative behavior.
It's about crowding out the bad with the good.
Yeah. And it's not that you're ignoring the bad behavior altogether. You're just kind of shifting the focus to what you do want to see.
Exactly. And positive reinforcement isn't just about verbal praise. It can be hugs, high fives, or even just a smile.
Okay, so we talked about presence, we talked about discipline, we talked about self-regulation, we've got positive reinforcement. Anything else?
Well, the last big concept they talked about in the video is collaborative problem solving.
Right, involving your kids in the solutions.
Exactly.
Like that kid who had the idea to lay out his clothes the night before.
Yes, exactly. And that's so powerful, not just for solving the immediate problem, but for teaching those valuable life skills.
Right, what kind of skills?
Well, for starters, critical thinking
Yeah.
and problem solving.
Yeah.
When you involve them in finding solutions, you're basically asking them to think for themselves and be creative.
Right. Makes them feel empowered.
Exactly. When they feel like they have a voice
Yeah.
and that their opinion matters,
Right.
they're more likely to cooperate.
I bet it builds their confidence, too.
But how do you, actually do that? How do you use collaborative problem solving, in your everyday life as a parent?
Well, they actually give a framework in the video.
Okay.
And the first step is to clearly identify the problem.
Okay.
And then you brainstorm solutions together.
Okay.
And then you choose a solution that works for everybody.
So instead of saying, go clean your room,
Yeah.
I might say, hey, your room's a mess. It's hard to find anything. What do you think we could do about it?
Exactly. And then maybe they suggest putting all the dirty clothes in the hamper first.
Okay.
Or maybe they want to put on some music while they clean. Whatever it is, it's about them being a part of that process. I love that because it takes the pressure off of me to be the bad guy all the time.
Right.
And it teaches them that we're a team.
Exactly, yeah.
Huh.
And they say you could use this approach for bigger issues too, like sibling rivalry or managing screen time.
So, if your kids are fighting over a toy, you can say, hey, it seems like you guys are having a hard time sharing. What do you think we can do to make things more fair?
Exactly.
Yeah.
You never know what they'll come up with.
I'm noticing this theme here.
Yeah.
Mindful discipline is about giving kids more agency, more autonomy.
It really is. It's a totally different approach.
Yeah, and I think a lot of us grew up with that old school parenting style, do as I say because I said so.
Right, exactly.
And it can be hard to
Yeah.
break away from those patterns.
It does take some effort, but the rewards are so worth it.
I agree. When we parent with mindfulness and intention, we're not just teaching them how to behave. We're helping them to become capable, confident, compassionate human beings.
It really is.
Wow. This is a lot to digest. It feels like we've just scratched the surface here.
I know, right? We've covered a lot of ground, but there's still so much to unpack. Stay with us for the final part of our deep dive as we explore some of the benefits of this kind of parenting and leave you with some takeaways you can use in your own life.
This mindful discipline deep dive has really given me a lot to think about.
Me too. It's definitely changed my perspective on a few things.
I keep coming back to this idea that it's so much more than just getting your kids to behave.
It is. It's really about, those deeper qualities like empathy and resilience.
Right. And the video even suggests that practicing mindful discipline can have these, ripple effects.
Oh, yeah, totally.
That go way beyond just our families.
It's like when we raise kids who are emotionally intelligent and can regulate their own behavior, it actually makes society a better place.
It's almost like a form of activism, which I love.
It is. Yeah, that's a great way to think about it.
But, let's be real. This mindful parenting stuff is hard. Oh, it is, yeah.
It takes so much work, and some days I just feel like I'm failing.
Well, and the video even says this is a journey, not a destination.
Right.
There will be days when you mess up.
Oh, yeah.
When you lose your cool.
For sure.
It happens. We're human.
I think we put so much pressure on ourselves to be perfect parents.
Yeah.
And then when we don't live up to that, we feel terrible.
Exactly. It's about progress, not perfection.
Right.
Just keep practicing, keep learning.
So as we wrap up, what are some of the most important things people should remember from this video? What should they focus on when they're trying to use mindful discipline?
I think the biggest thing is being present.
Okay.
Put down your phone, really listen, and try to see the world through your child's eyes.
Such good advice. And I would add that self-regulation is so important too.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
We need to model how to manage our own emotions so they can learn from us.
Right. And remember all those techniques, the pausing and the breathing and the counting to 10.
All those things really do help. And don't be afraid to ask for support.
And, I think it's important to remember that discipline is not about punishment.
Right.
It's about guiding and supporting your kids.
It's about teaching them, helping them learn from their mistakes.
And don't forget to notice when they're doing things right.
Yes. Positive reinforcement. It's so important.
Well, this has been so insightful. I'm really glad we did this deep dive.
Me too. Mindful discipline is so important, and I really hope that this conversation has helped people think about parenting in a new way.
I hope so too. And as we wrap up, I want to leave our listeners with a question. What really resonated with you from this mindful discipline video? What's one small change you can make today to be a more mindful parent? Thanks for joining us for this deep dive, and until next time, stay mindful.